is a little area of Elkmont called Daisy Town. The folks that owned these cabins came up for the summer. They rode the train from Knoxville. So we have the owner of the newspaper, the owner of the bakery, the owner of the florist shop. I mean, these were people that had money and could afford a vacation home. So they would ride the 3 or 4 hour train ride from Knoxville to come up here and spend the summer. They come hunting and fishing. This was all before the park, of course. Okay. And then when the park bought this property, they chose to take half the price of the land that they had to be able to continue to use the houses. So the leases on these houses ran all the way up into the early 90s. They built it about 1910, and they just recently been restored. So you might notice some fresh paint. All the windows are intact. The doors are on their hinges, which was not the case 6 years ago. These houses were condemned and falling apart. All the people that came up here to stay congregated and ate their suppers and socialized in the clubhouse. I'll tell you a good example, or a good kind of a good Hollywood example would be the movie Dirty Dancing.
That's what I was thinking of.
So they all showed up on the train with their luggage, and someone cooked for them, because from Knoxville came cooks from the Cherokee Country Club, and they brought food and they cooked for them. So if you've been in any of the houses, you'll notice a few things, like the kitchens look like afterthoughts because they were built on after this became a national park. Electricity wasn't added until the 50s, which was possible because they were leasing these cabins from the park. They no longer owned the land because of eminent domain. You probably know this, that the park was formed as a result of eminent domain. If you've been in any other parts of the park, you've seen some old log cabins and churches and mills. All those people had to leave when this became a national park, which was, this particular piece of property was purchased in 1925. So these people actually used these houses for another, 70 years after it became a national park.
But it was just the families that were here.
Yeah, so these families chose leases, lifetime leases, but they traded their lifetime leases for electricity. So when the park decided to turn the old town of Elkmont into a campground, the condition that Sevier County gave them was, we're not going to run electricity all the way from Gatlinburg up here for one ranger station. So you're going to have to figure out a way, if you want to negotiate leases with these people, you could give them some electricity, but they'll have to trade their leases for that to make it worth their while. So they traded for 20-year leases. So that began in 52. So it renewed in 72, and that's why that magic date of 1992 is that last of that. The park didn't renew any more leases anywhere in the park after 1992. So this is kind of a little different part of the history of the park. Most of the history that you hear about the park are the logging companies, and you also hear a lot about the early settlers, folks that came over from Germany, and the Scotch-Irish that came over on the boat and landed in North Carolina, South Carolina. That's the folks that moved in here. But the settlement of Knoxville was a pretty big town at that time. And so when folks got word that these mountains were really rich with a lot of hunting and fishing, they wanted to come up here and spend time. Of course, this was before the park. So there's a lot of history before the national park.
So when were the last Indians up here?
So, the Indian Removal Act was in 1838. So the interesting part about that is the eastern band of the Cherokee actually hid in these mountains. And if you've ever been to Cherokee, North Carolina, then that's a 100% owned Cherokee. It's not a reservation, it's considered a qualla boundary. So technically, the removal occurred in 1838. But because they were able to hide out and didn't emerge until it was legal for them to own land, that's why you have Cherokee, North Carolina today. So the removal of the Indians from this territory, if you remember the history in the 1830s,
Not
was
a very
actually
peaceful removal.
It wasn't. It was the Trail of Tears. You remember studying about the Trail of Tears. A lot of those folks died. But today there's a vibrant community about 25 miles from here on the North Carolina side of the park, right up on the boundary. If you look at a map at our park, there's a little square, almost like a little puzzle piece. That's the qualla boundary, which is where the Cherokee, the eastern band of the Cherokee now live. So they're the only ones that actually survived the removal, and actually it was their ancestors, right? Probably 3 generations ago. But yeah, you're right, Cherokee were here first, hunted this area, this whole southern Appalachian. We're in the southern Appalachian Mountains. And this is where,
Who actually owned this to start all this? Was it
so a
company?
fellow named Colonel Townsend, a gentleman from Pennsylvania, bought this land. This was part of an 80,000 acre piece of property. He bought it for the purpose of logging it. So if you've seen people hiking, they're hiking the old train track. So he put in a train track from, if you've been to Townsend, Tennessee, so Townsend is where the sawmill was. And the route you took to get up here, that entire route was a train track. And it kept going. It went all the way to North Carolina. So his property started in Townsend and went all the way to Clingman's Dome, which is where the train stopped.
That's a lot of land.
Wow.
It's about 80,000 acres.
And y'all got all this.
We bought everything. They actually, it's interesting to hear that that's the very first check that we've written was for this property. So this 80,000 acres, they wrote a check, and it started the beginning of forming the national park. For an example, that was in 1925, and the park wasn't official until 1934. So it took all those years to buy the land. Tennessee had to buy their side. North Carolina had to buy their side. This is a park that straddles two states. You've probably seen that on the map. And together, Tennessee and North Carolina donated this land to the federal government to be run as a national park. But it had to be purchased first because it was all, every bit of it was owned by somebody. So this is a 522,000 acre park, and it took about 10 years to buy all the land. But you're standing right in the middle of the very first piece of property. And because of that, the train track was taken up. So it was a dirt road for many years, but obviously now modern cars and modern things, you know, they paved it back in the, let's see,
So do y'all ever get
50s, I think.
people like you said, the Indians here? Like, what would keep somebody just from going deep and just living up the hill? And you
There's a
couldn't-
lot of areas of this park that are so remote.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Like, there could be